So far this year, the fire department has investigated over 175 related fires, more than double the number of battery-related fires from 2021, and quadruple the number of such fires in 2020.
God, yeah. This is a tough topic, and I've been wanting to talk about this for a really long time, but wasn't really sure how to do it. You know, maybe it's better to wait until somebody else tells the story, but then can the media actually talk about this without being influenced by their advertisers or, you know, some other connection that they have? Are they going to be able to tell this story the right way? Are they actually going to be able to explain all the things that I'm seeing? And I guess, you know, that's the perfect opportunity to use this channel. But then how does that impact me? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people not really liking what I'm going to talk about here. How is this going to impact the industry? It's really about like why I got into this in the first place, right? It's about to try to help people, to try to help change people's lives, to improve people's lives, to help change the way that they get around and hopefully lessen their dependence on foreign oil and this sort of thing. So that's why, you know, I'm just going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about batteries. I'm going to talk about where we're at now, where I think that we got to go. The reality is, to put it short, you don't want to watch the video, is I think most batteries are really not that safe and people don't want to talk about it. This video is going to be a little bit long. There's just so much to unpack here. I guess I feel like I've been kind of bottling a lot of this stuff up for a long time. So we'll put chapters in the bottom. You can kind of jump around if you wanted to hear about specific things or understand these specific topics. But I hope you watch the full video, and I hope you find it to be helpful, informative. And if you have other things to share, like, please put them in the comments, reach out to me. But, you know, definitely if you put it in the comments, other people are able to see them. And I think that that's really helpful. So enjoy. So what really is the issue here? Is this just a New York City thing? Is this a national thing? Is this a worldwide thing? And I think it's a little bit complicated to answer that question. Certainly it seems like New York City is where the issue is exemplified to the highest degree, I guess you can say. We're not hearing about people dying in other places as a result of battery fires. But I imagine there are battery fires. I imagine on some level they're not reported in the same way that they are. As there's a heightened sense of awareness for these things, it's more likely that people are reporting them in a different way. They're also in a very densely populated place, so it's more likely that people are going to report them. But I have heard, you know, people report on here that in Europe it doesn't seem to be as great of an issue. I think that that's for a variety of different reasons. One, I think probably the way that people consume products there is a little bit different. I feel like it's relatively widely known that Americans generally a little bit easier to purchase products that are going to throw away. And I think we're improving upon that, but historically that does seem to be something common in our society, unfortunately. So you have a higher tendency to have a lower quality product, and I think that I'm seeing that here, where people are purchasing a lower quality product and maybe not necessarily understanding that the lower quality product might also mean that it's potentially hazardous in this way. It's also important to recognize that when these incidents do occur, that they might not necessarily be reported in the same capacity that others might expect. You'd say like, oh, I'd probably hear about it. The reality is how business often works is things get kind of covered up behind NDAs and payoffs and that sort of thing. And I'm not trying to put out some sort of conspiracy or whatever, but that's the reality. And maybe people accept that this is just a normal part of doing business, but I think it's important to recognize that stuff. The other thing is a high number of products that are coming from China, and I don't mean it how you think. It's not about that China just makes low quality products. It's actually, I think that the products in China often may be made for the Chinese market, and they might be made to a different standard with the different use case in mind. One thing that I learned in some of my research is that it's pretty common that people charge their batteries outside in China. To my understanding, there's actually some facilities quite often where you can charge your battery. We just don't have that sort of thing here. We might in the future. There's a lot of people pushing for that. There's actually an organization in New York City that's pushing for that, which I really like that idea. I think that this is one way that we can potentially solve that. If you think about it, if you're a product designer, if you're a manufacturer, if you're manufacturing with that in mind, you're not saying like that I have to make sure that I can charge it next to my bed while I'm sleeping. There's a different standard that you might adhere to if you're thinking in that way. But one of the things I wanted to talk about specifically to people in the New York City area, there's a lot of talk about buildings not allowing e-bikes inside of them.
After a devastating fire that injured dozens of people, a growing number of apartment buildings are now banning e-bikes on their properties, citing fire hazard.
And what do we do? How do we respond to that? That's a tough one. For one, I mean, you could say, hey, listen, well, New York City has a new fire code that's launched in 2022. Basically, they're saying if a product is UL, then it's safe. So in theory, a building could say, well, we're only going to allow UL listed batteries to be charged in the building, but that could be challenging, and whose responsibility is going to be to audit that? You could potentially have a safe charging place, some sort of fireproof container that you can charge the batteries in. The nice thing is most new buildings, since 20 years or something like that, in New York City, they put in some regulation that any new buildings are built, they're required to have bike storage, which is kind of cool. You know, one is probably making sure that the bike room has appropriate suppression facilities. Maybe there's an opportunity to provide charging in the bike room, and which might create less hazards of people having these things in their apartments, etc. There was a big talk about New York City public housing, potentially just having an all-out ban on electric bikes and their storage in their buildings. This is a big deal. I mean, I don't know that people fully grasp like the implications of these new regulations, and I don't think it's going to slow down. And sure, it's widely recognized all the benefits that electric bikes and e-scooters and everything like that bring to the population, especially, you know, cities like New York that are so dense in their population and they really don't have that many transportation solutions. I mean, sure, we have trains and buses, and they're actually pretty good compared to many places. The automobile is largely not working, and I think that a lot of people find an electric bike is a good alternative to that. So there's no denying the benefits that these products bring, whether it's to commute or to, you know, get some recreation or just get out and enjoy yourself or whatever the case may be. But I think until we deal with these hazards, their potential benefit, the potential future of these products is really going to be limited. We're at this place right now where there could be a real setback to this industry. Even though it might be somewhat localized to New York City, the concerns might be heightened in New York City and other similar cities with a high level of density. I think that it is a national problem, and it is something that needs to be addressed on a national level, and it likely will be, just because the way that trade and commerce happens today. If the city was to address it as they're trying to, you know, you can't sell a product that's not certified. What's to prevent somebody from going out of state and purchasing that product or having it shipped to them? And sure, maybe they can make regulations to prevent somebody from shipping as well, or on paper to do that, but is that actually going to happen? However, on the federal level, if it was to happen through CPSC, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, what they could do is actually stop these products from coming into the US if they might not meet a certain safety standard. This essentially is like one of the main solutions here. That's not going to happen overnight. It doesn't work like that. The CPSC, generally speaking, how they work is that they react to a problem. This is the way that regulation generally works in the US. Works differently in different countries, but in the US, it's designed in such a way that something is legal until it's illegal, until it's specifically legislated to be illegal. And different people have different feelings on that topic, but that's just how it is, and that's how CPSC works. They need to identify that it's a problem, that they can create a statistical analysis and understand the problem to a great enough degree that you can actually create a regulation for that. Believe that this has been happening. There's been some reactions. There's been some reactions on a relatively large scale. Recently, there was a recall of a company called Ancheer. CPSC required them to recall 22,000 bikes that had these batteries, which the CPSC deemed to be unsafe as a result of some fires that had happened. Now they could react in a similar way that they did with the hoverboard and require something like UL. I suspect that this is likely what's going to happen. I made a whole video on this thing, but the synopsis is that they required UL overnight. You couldn't sell a product that was not UL. Seems to be the direction that things are going. UL, for those who don't know, is Underwriters, Laboratories. This was was an organization that started in the early 1900s. This was the early days that electrical wiring in houses, electrical lighting specifically. There was a lot of fires. Insurance companies say, well, how am I going to insure this house? I don't know if it's safe, but if I know that the electrical wiring is safe, then I can feel confident that it's okay. So they formed this laboratory for the underwriters of the insurance, UL Underwriter Laboratories. They were able to test products, and they said, well, okay, we'll insure your home if you use products that are UL tested or listed or whatnot. As a result, they really improved the situation pretty dramatically. And that's happened in many other industries. There's a lot of other like safety type things that they've been involved in. I think most people have an expectation from other industries that there is a sort of standard that we adhere to, that things are tested. I mean, you have these more mature markets like the automotive market, safety standards that exist. There's testing requirements. Listen, I'm sure there's plenty of engineers or people that might be involved in these industries that might watch this video. I encourage you, like, poke holes in this. Tell me what's going on. Because from my side, I see this industry potentially doing some serious damage to itself as a result of not adhering to any sort of standard. I hate to say it, but I think that it's gotten beyond the point that the industry can regulate itself. I think we've talked about trying to regulate ourselves as an industry. After speaking with many different parties and many different companies, it's clear to me that until it's required, it's not happening. There might be a few that are voluntarily complying. We work with one, which is Bosch. Panasonic is another company that has voluntarily complied and really looked to say, like, what is is there a standard here? And I think more respectable companies, larger companies, they look at this and they say, well, we're going to adhere to whatever the latest, highest standard that exists. And that's not easy, but it's not impossible. I mean, many people think that it's impossible. I think for some companies it might be impossible. As much as it pains me to say, it's like, should those companies be in business? Should they be producing products? And that's really a tough thing, because one thing a lot of people don't recognize is that a lot of innovation that happened in the electric bike space really started in some of these kind of grassroots tinker sort of things. There's a website, Endless Sphere, that's around for a long time, and there's different companies that have created these kind of DIY products and that sort of thing, and kind of borrowing from different industries and putting things together and building their own batteries and everything like that. And I don't want to see that go away. I think that that's important, but at the same time, from my perspective, is not made for the general market. Is it possible for that to still exist, still have this kind of mass market product that the consumer can just buy and not think about and not worry about? I think it's challenging. So what sparked this recently to the point where I say, I gotta make this video. I just gotta talk about this, gotta get these things off my chest. About 2 weeks ago, November 14th, there was a city council meeting. 3 months ago, September, FDNY had a symposium about electric battery safety, specifically related to e-mobility and that sort of thing. They're seeing this rise in fires and everything like that, and trying to figure out how to deal with that. They had a big event going on. I was actually called to speak at another event actually on this topic, oddly enough. It was called The Cycle of Influence, and this was me kind of speaking to the industry, if you will, about some of the safety and regulatory concerns in the industry at the moment. So I didn't get a chance to check out the fire department symposium, but I did get some kind of clip notes there, and the bottom line is they're taking serious steps towards this. One of them is that they've updated the fire code for 2022 in New York City to require UL. The challenge is that it hasn't really been publicized, and I'm not really sure how they're going to go about that exactly. I think that they need to work with City Council as well, and they're trying to do that, and that in part was this meeting that happened on November 14th, which was recorded. It's a 2-hour video. You can check it out. One thing I will know is, as I talked about before with CPSC, FDNY is talking with them. They're saying, please help. Like, we're going to try to do what we can to regulate locally, but we also need your help on the federal level, because we need to prevent these products from coming into our market. Because even if they can get all the retailers in New York City to comply, somebody can cross the river and go to New Jersey. Somebody can buy online, and they can buy a product that doesn't meet the current standards. So they have one bill which is set to regulate the sale of products and they really want to encourage companies to only sell products that have been tested. And actually, the City Council, I really applaud their efforts, but I think that unfortunately they're kind of ill-equipped to even deal with this issue. I mean, I think that most people, companies, organizations are. This is a new technology, this is a new experience, and we just kind of gotta try to use as much collective knowledge as we can and try to figure out how we go from here. And so I appreciate their willingness to delve into these uncharted waters. And so they asked the fire department if we were to use this independent testing standard, who would it be? Is there something other than UL? And they said at the moment, no.
Does the FDNY think that allowing any nationally recognized testing laboratory would help resolve the issue, or are you strongly suggesting that the requirement be UL?
We recommend reference to specific UL standards, which have become the industry standards that the Bike Dealers Association itself is recommending.
At the moment, they don't recognize anything else aside from that. There might be other standards. And some will argue that, well, hey, in Europe, they don't require UL, and that's not really an issue. I've thought about that a lot. This has come up quite a bit. But I think that that's for a variety of reasons. One is I think that consumers in Europe are a little bit different than the US consumer. I think Europeans there's a little bit more awareness about sustainability. It's certainly part of many initiatives within the government. And there's another initiative that exists in Europe that doesn't exist in the US, and it's called the anti-dumping tariff. And basically there's a large tariff associated with many products coming from China specifically. I believe it's about 25%. The way that they had presented this idea is that basically there's products coming from China that are intentionally sold at a lower price, perhaps lower than is even profitable for those companies, so they can try to take over the market, and then they could eventually own the market and then raise the price. That's a deep topic. I don't want to get into it. If we didn't have this influx of products that were unsafe, if we weren't already dealing with this issue, maybe there was another way, again, for the industry to regulate or whatever. My feeling is the standard is just going to require UL. Actually, the National Bike Dealers Association put out a statement. They're also recommending retailers to talk to their suppliers, and I guess that's also to some extent an effort to self-regulate, but you could probably see the writing on the wall that CPSC is likely going to just require it. So the companies that don't do it, they might get left behind. I don't know. I mean, the way the hoverboard thing worked, I think a lot of those companies did get left behind. And you might be wondering, looking at somebody like myself as a retailer that's been doing this for 11 years and has a pretty nice business that I built up, why don't I just sit and wait and don't give any of these companies a heads up and just allow them to fail? That could be one strategy, but as I said earlier, it's not just about business. If it was, I could have made a lot of money a long time ago, really. That's the bottom line. If I wasn't so focused on standards and safety and everything like that, it would have been a lot easier for me to grab cash and sell cheap products for profit and keep it moving. I personally couldn't live myself doing that. I couldn't feel comfortable with the idea that I might have products out there that are going to be hazardous to people. And I'm not saying that other companies necessarily do that or feel that or know that. I don't know. I mean, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but knowing what I know about many businesses, it's all about the profit. It's all about, what do I get out of this? And if there's some casualties, I think many people accept that, and that's kind of troubling. I mean, we've seen that time and time again. We've seen that in the auto industry. We've seen that in many different areas. So, I don't know. I could talk for a long time about this, and I'm going to try to move through this. I wanted to move through these city council bills because I think that they're relevant. Hopefully, this will serve as kind of a conversation starter. I'm not sure that all my ideas are perfect. I am speaking my truth to the best of my ability. That's one thing I'm very clear on. And I will say that I am doing my best to not be motivated by profit. Because some will argue, hey, I sell electric bikes. Many of the electric bikes I sell are expensive. Many of them are more expensive than the average bike. And my approach to that is very different than what most people would think. You know, my approach is let me find the best electric bikes on the market and I'm going to sell them in my shop. That's it. And many will say that those are not approachable for many of the average consumers. And if this standard is to become required, will that remove some of the lower end of the market? Will that remove some people's opportunities to have a more accessible product? That was a concern of mine. That was a thought that I had. Although I don't feel like I'm personally prepared to focus on the lower end of the market, it's very difficult to do that successfully. It actually takes more resources to sell a lower end product than it does to sell a more quality product. I will note that there are electric bikes on the market in the sub $2,000 price range that are UL listed. And that's comforting to see. I think it's possible to create products that are under $1,000. There's hoverboards that are on the market currently that meet the UL standard there, and they're $500. So it could be argued that some of these electric bikes that are created, they could meet the same standard and have a very slight adjustment to price. It might mean that some companies can't innovate as quickly. That's a concern, but is that really that important? Do we need that? Do we always need the next new fancy thing? Because think about it, if each battery or motor system or complete bike needs to be tested, it could slow things down. That could also allow products to meet their appropriate scale, which could effectively bring the price down as well. So these things could balance themselves out. I guess when you think about a lot of these things, it really is because it's a new market. These city council things, requirement to sell listed products, they putting forth a bill to request that the fire department put out more education. There's another bill about making it illegal to rebuild batteries. This one's kind of tough. A lot of people will argue about the sustainability thing. I mean, there has been a lot of reports specifically that these refurbished batteries have been the cause of a fire, and that's been a lot of the response of the fire department is, hey, people are using the incorrect chargers or they're using rebuilt batteries, this and that. It's certainly a thing. I'm not there firsthand in these investigations or anything like that. I do know that there was a report in a bike shop in Florida that burnt down from a rebuilt battery from a reputable company that specializes in this stuff. There's also a really big topic that's been coming up lately, and actually Louis Rossman, super cool guy, makes some really interesting videos, and he's kind of a tinkerer and he's kind of into building things and this and that, and he's kind of probably in a similar class of what I was describing about some of the people that have helped to innovate some different things, and maybe he just kind of experimented with stuff on his own for his electric bike, but he's been a big advocate of this right to repair idea, and he's got a lot of progress there. I'm not sure if right to repair is right for batteries. I'd actually be interested to see what he thinks about that, and maybe we can talk about that at some point. I know he has videos on his channel specifically of his battery going on fire in New York City. He's one of these 100+ fires, and I think that was last year, and it was in the doorway of an apartment building. Fortunately, I don't think anybody was injured in that incident, but it very easily could have went that way. And Louis, I love your content. You've helped promote our channel and kind of boost us up when we talked about this time we got fines from the city, a $25,000 fine. I made a video on that, and so I certainly, by no means, am trying to throw shade on that. I'm truly interested in having this conversation about right to repair and batteries. And I will note there has been something that happened recently in the industry, is this thing called Call to Recycle, where the electric bike industry, many of the brands signed on and retailers signed on and were signing up for, when they purchase an electric bike, that covers the expenses of recycling the battery at end of line. I think they're saying it's somewhere over 90% of the battery is able to be recycled. It probably makes sense for it to kind of go back in that direction, for things to be broken down into their individual form and things to be remanufactured by professionals. And perhaps there needs to be some other level of certification. I mean, I guess in theory, maybe there is a UL standard that you can remanufacture to. I don't know. I think that that's kind of the least of our worries. I think right now we're just trying to stop the bleeding, if you will. And there's another bill just really about the education of food workers. I mean, in New York City specifically, this is the most prominent use of electric bikes. This is the group that's going to likely be most impacted by these bills. The challenge is, I don't think it's really clear what the solution is, because the reality is most of the products that are on the market and sold to these individuals don't meet these standards. They're not UL tested, and it likely would be difficult for them to meet the standards of UL. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I've thought about a bunch of ideas. There are some different organizations that are helping to present new ideas. One of them is this organization about safer charging, and they're trying to present ideas about setting up facilities similar to what they have in China that allow for outdoor charging. That makes sense. I mean, I think if you can kind of mitigate the risk in that way, that would be helpful. Maybe there's some way that a new battery and charger can be built for some of the most common bikes that are used there. There are a small number that they're just used quite often, so that could be a way. That could be a business opportunity for somebody. This is not something that I'm looking to pursue personally. I wish I could. I wish I had the time and energy to do it, but I don't. Other things have been discussed about some sort of rebate program, a buyback program. And we're talking about probably 50,000 bikes in New York City that might not be meeting the new standard. So how do you deal with that? I don't know. I guess that's the point. It's, this thing's messy. There's not a clear solution. I figured the best thing we can do is talk about it, try to present ideas, continue to talk about it. I mean, there was a lot of press about this 2 weeks ago, but it's largely, not discussed in the news much anymore. And, that's just how things go. That's how news cycles go. And maybe I should have tried to catch that news cycle and put this video out at that time. I guess you got to think about that. How are you going to be effective? Like, how can we be effective? I mean, I'm just this one guy. I'm a retailer. I sell electric bikes and make YouTube videos. Like, who am I? What are my qualifications? I'm not an engineer. I mean, but the point being, as I mentioned before, is like we got to talk about it. We got to get out in front of this thing. And I think that generally speaking, the consumer should be more educated about this topic, because I think that they're largely not right now. And I'm happy to speak with other people about this. Obviously, I got a lot of ideas and thoughts and perspective on it. It really impacts me so much all the time. I think about it all the time. Nonetheless, I hope that this video was helpful. I hope to discuss more things. I'm gonna do my best to try to be active in the comments. Yeah, just really trying to find some better answers here, and hopefully this is one way that it can get us closer there. So hopefully you found this video to be helpful. Yeah, I'll try to continue to make videos to discuss this. I'm also thinking about potentially like trying to open up the conversation in different ways. I often make these videos in this format of just kind of talking to the camera and stuff like that, but perhaps I gotta start more of like kind of podcast format or something like that, and talking about this and talking about other topics that are relevant to the industry and our progress. I mean, because I think some will say, hey, listen, like, how hazardous are cars? Sure, they are more hazardous in many different ways, but I don't think that we should not talk about this, not think about this. If we want this industry, this movement to be successful, it needs to be as strong as it can be. This is one of the things that can really potentially just pull the carpet from underneath it, if you will. I don't know if that's the right expression, but you know what I'm saying, just kind of take the wind out of its sails. So I think that's it for now, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.